stop. If you are over 60 and you reach for a skirt because it feels like the forgiving choice, no waistband fighting your legs, no fabric pulling at your thighs, there is a very good chance the exact skirt you trust the most is quietly making your belly look bigger every single time you put it on. Not because of your body. Because of the skirt. And by the end of this video, you are going to know exactly which mistakes to look for and exactly what to wear instead, starting with something you probably already own. Think about the skirt you reach for most often, the one you consider your safest, most dependable option. Now think about how it actually feels 3 or 4 hours into wearing it, not the moment you first zip it up in front of the bedroom mirror. If something has quietly shifted, bunched, or started to feel bulkier than it looked at 9 in the morning, that shift is not your imagination, and it is not your body changing shape over the course of a day. It is a construction detail finally revealing itself once your body starts moving instead of standing still. Skirts have a reputation for being the easy, breezy piece, the one category of clothing that supposedly asks less of your body than pants or a fitted dress ever could. But so many apple-shaped women over 60 quietly discover that their favorite skirts have started working against them in ways nothing else in the closet does. A strange bulk at the waist, a fold that appears out of nowhere by early afternoon, a silhouette that photographs wider than it feels standing in the mirror at home. Nobody ever explains why, so you simply assume it is one more thing your body is doing to you. I want you to know something right now, before we go any further. It was never your body doing anything wrong. It was almost always one specific design choice, sitting quietly at your waistline or built into the very construction of the skirt, that nobody ever taught you to look for. Skirts hide their flaws differently than tops or dresses do, which is exactly why these particular mistakes go unnoticed for years, sometimes decades, without a single person pointing them out. I am going to walk you through 6 skirt mistakes today, counting down from 6 to 1, the exact mistakes I see apple-shaped women over 60 make again and again, often with the very skirts they consider their most reliable, most comfortable pieces. Your body has never been the problem here. These are simple, learnable construction details, the same visual and structural math a stylist checks automatically every single day, and once you understand it, you will look at every single skirt hanging in your closet completely differently. I promise you this. The last mistake on this list, the number 1 detail, is the one almost nobody has ever had explained to them properly, and it is the single biggest change you can make to how a skirt behaves against your body. It costs nothing extra to apply, and it does not require replacing your entire skirt collection overnight. It simply requires knowing exactly what to check for the next time you are holding a skirt in a fitting room, deciding whether it deserves a permanent place in your closet. Once you know it, you will be able to check for it with your own hands in a matter of seconds, long before you ever step in front of a mirror. So stay with me all the way to the end, because I really do not want you to miss it. Let's start at the beginning. Number 6. Reaching for a stiff, rigid pencil skirt made from fabric with absolutely no stretch built into it at all. A structured pencil skirt can feel like the sharp, professional choice, the kind of piece that photographs beautifully hanging perfectly still on a hanger. But rigid fabric with zero give creates a very specific problem the moment your body actually moves through a normal day, rather than standing motionless in a fitting room mirror. Sitting down pulls the fabric taut across your lap and stomach. Walking any real distance creates visible strain lines across the front. And standing back up afterward often leaves a slightly creased, pulled shape that takes several long minutes to settle back into place, usually right around the exact moment someone hands you a coffee and starts a conversation at a meeting or a lunch. The fix here is not abandoning the pencil skirt shape entirely, because a well-made one is genuinely one of the most flattering silhouettes available to almost any body. It is choosing fabric with a small amount of stretch woven in, typically somewhere between 3 and 5% elastane blended into wool, cotton, or a structured synthetic. This small addition barely changes how sharp or professional the fabric looks or feels to the touch, but it makes an enormous difference in how the skirt behaves once you actually sit, walk, and move through your real life instead of standing perfectly still. Before buying any pencil skirt, do the same sitting test that matters just as much here as it does with pants. Sit down fully in the fitting room chair, cross your legs if that is part of your normal day, and notice whether the fabric pulls tightly and uncomfortably or moves with you in a way that feels genuinely wearable for hours at a time. There is also a small vent or kick pleat detail worth checking while you are at it, usually placed at the back hem of a pencil skirt. A vent that opens with a bit of ease when you walk takes real pressure off the fabric across your hips and thighs, which in turn takes pressure off the waistband and belly area as well, since the whole skirt is no longer fighting your stride with every single step. A pencil skirt with zero stretch and zero vent is asking the most from your body with the least amount of give anywhere in the entire garment, which is exactly the combination that tends to age well on a hanger and poorly on an actual moving human being. But the very next mistake flips something almost every woman assumes about comfort and forgiveness in a skirt, so stay with me for this one. Number 5. Assuming a fully elasticated, heavily gathered waist skirt is automatically the most comfortable and most forgiving option available. This belief makes complete sense on the surface. An all-around elastic waistband stretches to fit almost any size, never restricts your breathing, and never digs in the way a fitted waistband sometimes can. But here is the detail that gets left out of that advice entirely. When an entire waistband is gathered evenly with elastic, all of that extra fabric has to bunch and fold somewhere as it gathers, and it bunches directly at your waistline, right at the exact point where an apple shape already carries the most volume. Instead of skimming past your midsection, the gathered fabric piles up in soft folds right there, adding visible bulk on top of bulk, an effect that often looks considerably larger in photographs than it actually feels while you are wearing it. The fix is not giving up on comfortable, elasticated skirts altogether. It is choosing a skirt where the elastic sits only at the back and sides of the waistband, with a flat, smooth panel across the front where your body needs the least added volume. This construction, sometimes simply labeled as a comfort waist or partial elastic waist, gives you nearly all the give and forgiveness of a fully elasticated skirt while keeping the front completely smooth and free of bunched fabric. Alternatively, look for a skirt built with fabric panels or gores instead of gathers, which creates natural flare and movement through the hem without needing a single fold of fabric bunched up anywhere near your waistline to achieve it. A quick way to check this before buying is simply turning the skirt to face you and looking closely at the front waistband panel rather than the whole waistband as one unit. If the front section lies completely flat with no visible gathering or puckering, and the elastic only becomes visible once you move your fingers toward the side seams, that skirt is very likely built with the partial elastic construction that works so much better for an apple shape. If the gathering runs continuously all the way around with no flat section anywhere, you are looking at the fully elasticated style that tends to bunch directly at your most prominent point. Number 4. Rolling down the waistband of a skirt that runs slightly too long for your height, folding the extra length over at the top to shorten the hem quickly before heading out the door. This is one of those quiet habits almost everyone does at some point without thinking twice about it, and I understand exactly why. It feels like a free, instant alteration, no scissors, no tailor, no waiting. But that folded roll of fabric sits directly at your waistline, adding a thick, visible band of extra bulk exactly at the point on your body that already needs the least additional volume. Worn under a tucked-in top, that rolled fold becomes even more obvious, creating a strange double bump right where a smooth, single waistband should sit. The fix is worth the small extra effort it requires. If a skirt genuinely runs too long for your height on a regular basis, a simple hem alteration at a local tailor is usually inexpensive and takes only a few days, and it permanently solves a problem that a rolled waistband only patches over temporarily and imperfectly every single time you wear it. If you are in a genuine rush and truly cannot avoid rolling the waistband just once, roll it as little as possible. Ideally less than a full inch, and always check yourself in a mirror while seated. Not just standing, since a rolled waistband tends to loosen and shift the moment you sit down for any length of time. If altering every long skirt feels impractical, another option worth knowing is shopping specifically by inseam or finished length rather than by size alone, since many brands now list the exact hem length in inches directly on the product description. Comparing that number against a skirt you already own and love can save you from the rolling habit altogether, because you simply stop bringing home skirts built for a different height in the first place. It takes an extra 30 seconds while shopping, and it means never reaching for a needle, a fold, or a hopeful safety pin again. Once you know your ideal finished length in inches, You can check it against almost any listing before the skirt even arrives at your door, saving yourself the disappointment of unpacking something that was always going to need this workaround. We are now more than halfway through this list, and if you recognize one or two of these habits in your own closet already, that is exactly the point of this video, not a reason to feel discouraged. Nobody ever taught most of us to check for these specific details, which is exactly why they hide in plain sight for years, quietly blamed on our bodies instead of on the garments themselves. And remember, the number one detail on this entire list, the single biggest change you can make, is still coming, so do not go anywhere yet. Number 3. Choosing a skirt with a drawstring tie that knots directly at the center front, right at the exact midpoint of your belly. Drawstring waists have become enormously popular over the past several years, especially on relaxed midi and maxi skirts, because they promise a customizable adjustable fit for a wide range of body types. But a drawstring tied in a bow or a simple knot creates a small, dense cluster of extra fabric exactly at the point where the tie sits, and when that tie sits at the center front, it places a visible lump of fabric directly at the most prominent point of an apple-shaped midsection, essentially drawing a small arrow pointing straight at the one area you were hoping to soften. The fix is remarkably simple once you know to look for it. Either tie the drawstring off to one side rather than dead center, letting the knot rest along your hip instead of your belly, or look specifically for skirts with an interior drawstring, one that adjusts the fit from inside a hidden casing without ever leaving a visible knot or bow on the outside of the garment at all. Interior drawstrings are becoming increasingly common on well-designed skirts precisely because designers have started to understand that an exposed tie does not flatter every single body the same way. If you already own a skirt with a center front tie you love, simply shifting that same tie to your side seam takes about 2 seconds and changes the entire visual effect instantly. It is worth mentioning that this same principle applies to the small fabric loops or belt carriers sometimes sewn onto a skirt's waistband. If those loops are positioned only at the center front, they tend to draw a tie or a thin belt to exactly that spot by default, since that is simply where the fabric naturally wants to sit. Skirts with loops positioned slightly off-center or along the side seams make it effortless to keep any tie or belt away from your midsection without having to think about it every single time you get dressed. Number 2. Selecting a skirt with several stacked horizontal ruffle tiers running across the hip and thigh area. Tiered ruffle skirts are romantic, feminine, and enormously popular for warm weather, and I understand the appeal completely. But every horizontal ruffle seam functions almost exactly like a horizontal stripe does on a top or a dress. It creates a hard visual break running side to side across your body, and when several of those breaks stack directly across your hip and belly area, the eye reads the whole area as considerably wider than a single unbroken piece of fabric ever would. The romantic ruffles you fell in love with on the hanger can end up chopping your midsection into visually competing horizontal sections the moment you actually put the skirt on your own body. What works so much better is a skirt built from vertical panels or gores instead of horizontal tiers, creating movement and volume through vertical seams that run up and down rather than side to side. A gored skirt gives you the same soft, flowing movement a tiered skirt offers, but the vertical construction elongates your silhouette instead of chopping it into horizontal sections. If you genuinely love the romantic, feminine feeling tiers provide and are not willing to give it up, look for a skirt where the tiers begin lower, starting around the knee or below rather than at the hip, keeping the busiest, most broken up part of the skirt as far away from your midsection as the design allows. Color can help soften this effect considerably as well, even on a skirt you already own. Tiered skirts made in one single, consistent color from top to bottom read far more like one continuous piece than tiered skirts, where each tier is a slightly different shade or pattern, since the color shift itself adds yet another visual break on top of the seam lines already created by the tiers. A single tonal tiered skirt in one shade throughout will always look calmer and more elongating than the same silhouette broken up further by contrasting colors between each layer. Now, before we get to the number 1 detail on this entire list, I want to explain exactly why everything else we have covered matters so much less without it. The fabric stretch, the elastic placement, the hem length, the drawstring position, the tier construction, every single one of those fixes genuinely helps, but every one of them is still working around a single central detail that decides more than all of the others combined. Once you understand this final piece, You are going to check the inside of every single skirt you own, and you will never shop for a skirt the same way again. Number 1. Ignoring the shape of the seam or yoke sitting at the top of the skirt, the piece of construction connecting the waistband to the body of the skirt itself. This is the exact detail almost nobody ever explains, and it might be the single most important construction choice on an entire skirt. More important than fabric, more important than length, more important than almost anything else we have discussed today. Most skirts are built with one straight seam running directly across the top, connecting a flat waistband to a flat panel of fabric below it in one continuous, unshaped line. On a body that does not curve much through the midsection, that straight seam sits comfortably enough. But on an apple shape, your torso curves outward right at the belly before curving back in toward the hip. And a straight, unshaped seam has no ability to follow that curve. It either sits at the exact widest point of your belly, cutting a hard line straight through it, or it sits just below that point, creating the same overhang effect we have discussed with pants and waistbands in earlier videos. What you want instead is a skirt built with a shaped or curved yoke, a structured panel sitting at the very top of the skirt that is specifically cut and seamed to curve along your body's actual line rather than running as one flat, straight piece. A shaped yoke typically sits a little higher at the center front than it does at the sides, following the natural curve of your belly instead of fighting against it. And from that curved seam downward, the fabric is completely free to flow, flare, or drape without a single tight or clinging point sitting directly against your fullest area. You get real structure and shape exactly where the yoke sits, and complete, uninterrupted softness in the fabric hanging below it. Think about how this plays out across a full day rather than just the moment you first try the skirt on at home. A skirt with a straight, unshaped seam is quietly fighting your belly the entire time you wear it, whether you are sitting through a long lunch, standing for a family photo, or simply moving through your afternoon errands. A skirt with a curved yoke never has that fight to begin with, because the structure was built to follow your shape, rather than resist it from the very first stitch. That distinction is the entire difference between a skirt you have to consciously manage all day and one you can genuinely forget you are wearing by the second hour. This construction detail works so much more powerfully than any other fix on this list because, exactly like the seam placement we have talked about with tops, dresses, and pants in earlier videos, it addresses the actual structural root of the problem rather than managing the result after the fact. Choosing stretch fabric helps. Adjusting a drawstring helps. Avoiding horizontal tiers helps. But none of those changes anything about the fundamental shape of the seam sitting against your body all day long. A curved yoke changes the actual architecture of the skirt itself, so you are no longer compensating every single time you get dressed. And you are simply wearing a garment that was genuinely built with your shape in mind from the very beginning. Once you know to look for this, you can identify a curved yoke with your fingers alone, tracing the inside seam before you have even glanced at the price tag. I had a client, a lovely practical woman named Linda, who told me she had given up on skirts entirely years earlier, convinced her waist had simply become too round for the style to ever look right on her again. She kept every one of her old skirts folded in a drawer, unable to part with them, but unwilling to wear them either. A whole drawer full of quiet disappointment she walked past every single morning. We did not change her size, and we did not change her body. We changed exactly one thing, guiding her towards skirts built with a curved yoke sitting above her belly's fullest point, paired with a partial elastic waist and a soft, vertically paneled hem instead of horizontal tiers. She wore one of those skirts to her granddaughter's graduation a few months later, and she told me afterward that she had forgotten, for the first time in years, to think about her waistband even once during a 4-hour outdoor ceremony in the heat. Nothing about her body had changed in those months. What had changed was the shape of the seam sitting against her. She donated that entire drawer of old skirts not long after, she told me, laughing, because she finally understood what had actually been wrong with them all along. That is the real power of understanding all 6 of these details together, rather than fixing just one and stopping there. Your body was never the problem, and it never needed to be hidden, managed, or apologized for. Most skirts on most racks were simply built using a standard, flat pattern that never once accounted for exactly how your torso curves, and now you know precisely what to check for, with your own hands, before you ever commit to buying another one. None of this requires an entirely new wardrobe, a dramatic budget, or waiting for some future version of your body to finally arrive before you allow yourself to feel comfortable getting dressed. It requires sitting down before deciding a skirt works, checking where the elastic actually sits, feeling for a curve inside the waistband seam, and noticing whether a drawstring or a tier is quietly adding bulk exactly where you do not need it. Small, informed choices, made once at the moment of buying, rather than fought with every single time you get dressed for the rest of the season. The next time you catch yourself tugging at a waistband or noticing a strange fold that was not there this morning, pause for one moment before deciding the skirt simply is not for you. Check the yoke, feel for the curve, notice where the elastic actually sits. More often than not, you will find the answer sitting quietly inside the seam, exactly where nobody ever thought to look before today. If any part of this felt like it was speaking directly to a skirt hanging in your own closet right now, I would love to know which mistake surprised you the most. Was it the rigid pencil skirt, the gathered elastic waist, or that final detail about the curved yoke seam? Tell me in the comments below, because your story might be exactly what helps another woman finally understand that it was never her body working against her, just one detail she never had the chance to learn about until now.